Good afternoon, viewers. We have with us Professor Kalyani Unkule. She is a professor in O.P Jindal University. She is also director of international affairs of O.P Jindal Global Universities, a university of prominence. Madam, you have a broad experience in education, both in India and abroad, and so you have recently gone to visit 4 countries to promote your book. What are your observations in these countries, the education system, and their teaching methods?
So, Iram, you're absolutely right. I've just published a book called Internationalizing the University, a Spiritual Approach, and here it is. And one of the reasons why I wanted to write a book was not just to have it on a shelf somewhere and to get a line in my resume, but to start a conversation about how universities can do better, how universities across the world can work together, not just to improve the education sector, but also address some of the common challenges facing society at large. And as you quite rightly mentioned, I'm just returning from a book tour of Spain, Germany, India, and Bangladesh. Where I had the opportunity at various different events, at various different fora, to interact with a variety of audiences and share the message of the book. Now, the exciting thing about me always is that there is something to learn from everybody. I think that there's this misconception that a lot of people have that we can only learn from the best, right? Now, the best, I think, is very subjective. The best is always defined according to certain criteria. And so I did not want to just go into kind of, North America or Europe or Australia with the message of the book. While there is a lot to learn from institutions there, I also wanted to learn from institutions based in countries which are in our South Asian neighborhood. And let me tell you, my experience in Bangladesh in particular was fantastic. I was hosted by North-South University and BRAC University for two quite different, book events. The university leadership was there. Professors there were in attendance. There was a lot of interest from students. I got a lot of questions everywhere I went. And so I think that these conversations are very important. And as I said, I always believe in learning from, there's something to learn from everybody. But when I came back from Bangladesh in particular, I was so impressed that, we should be learning more from countries which are similarly situated to us, have faced certain similar challenges to us, rather than always trying to learn something from societies or countries or institutions that are already there, or that have already made it or are already considered advanced or developed in some sense. I think there's a lot to learn from each other and share with each other for South Asian countries and the education system here. They can really relate to our experiences much better, and there's honestly a lot that we can share based on what we are good at as Indian institutions with these guys. And that was the most positive takeaway from my visit. I would also say that there is a lot of interest in India and sharing of experiences of somebody who does their work in India but has a global imagination. People are looking for that kind of work. People are looking for that kind of interaction, and people are really interested in seeing some thought leadership, some intellectual output, and some new vision from Indians and India and where it stands in the world.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, since you have already written a book, you're an expert in internationalizing the universities, and you have similarly gone to the uh, countries across to promote your book and interact with people. Where do you think there are some key factors where India has edge over the other countries?
Thank you for calling me an expert. I wouldn't I wouldn't claim to be an expert myself. I think what I've tried to do is bring a perspective, add a voice to the global debate on higher education based on my own experiences working where I do, from the point of view of somebody based in a certain part of the world in the global south. So my mission has always been to contribute to an ongoing conversation. A lot of people are part of that conversation, making very interesting contributions. So you're coming to a question about where India stands. Thank you for asking that. As I said earlier, I think as Indians underestimate the standing we have in the world now. A lot of people are keen to learn from our experiences. We are actually good at dealing with things like scale, like diversity, and that is something to share with the rest of the world. I think we are in danger of constantly like berating ourselves and comparing ourselves with everybody else and thinking that we lag behind. I don't believe that learning should be one-sided ever. I believe there's something for all to share based on your experiences. I think that a lot of governments, if you see around the world, are trying to fund universities to send students to India today. What does that tell us? That tells us that people have much more of a sensitivity that there is an emerging part of the world of which everybody needs to build an understanding. Superficial reasons like, okay, we talk often about globalization or global careers. And there's this idea that you need to have intercultural competence to have a global career. Now, that understanding of intercultural competence is honestly something that I don't favor, because it means that you go understand how that I feel that the real meaning, the real purpose, the real objective of intercultural dialogue should be understanding how we're all similar to each other, right? At the end of the day, despite our differences, how diversity is a good thing, but in the end, we're all the same, we're all responsible for each other, and we're all citizens of the world. So I think if we, this is an attempt I've made to do, I've made an attempt of looking at this systematically in my book. I think we as Indians can definitely contribute this new perspective on intercultural dialogue, on intercivilizational relations, if only we step back and we recognize our own strengths. And therefore, I feel that this discussion about what India can contribute is way more important today than how India can just develop by sending students abroad and by learning from, the best.
Okay, ma'am, since you have already written so much in your book, so what are the some key policies that the government needs to make our universities at par with the international standards, like the international rankings, so that we reach there?
Leadership is very important. We often underestimate the importance of the significance of vision. I think we set ourselves targets and we become obsessed with those targets. For example, we want X number of universities in the global rankings. Now, aiming for targets without having a vision or without having a reasoning as to why we need that is, I think, one of the stumbling blocks. I see institutions around the world, they have very clear roadmaps that they develop. They have a very clear understanding of their strengths, and they have very clear reasoning for which there is buy-in for why we are pursuing a certain goal. It's not enough just to know what the goal is, but we have to all be convinced that it is something that is good for us, and it is not just a box that we are ticking. Right? And institutions should play a supportive role in this, in promoting a culture of thought leadership. Without thought leadership, without vision, without discussion and debate, we are just going to end up being copycats. And, the copycat can at best pass, but the copycat will never end So I think that the first step, the first important measure that we need in place is encouraging thought leadership, encouraging a broader vision of where we are headed, and also having all of these discussions by being sensitive to who we are as a society, what are our needs, and not to sacrifice and compromise on local priorities, local objectives, and local excellence, just chasing behind some mirage of global excellence.
Thank you, ma'am. Speaking about the local access and the local objectives, ma'am, do you think that the students, the scholars, need to have some national or international exposure? How much do you think it gives an edge to the student and scholars other than the local knowledge?
Um, I mean, so far we have been for the wrong reasons, I would say. First of all, there's a lot of brand consciousness in India still. We have this idea, which I was talking about earlier, that so and so countries are the best and so institutions are world class. And thereby we often lose out on the opportunity to learn from everybody. We forget that there's learning to be had everywhere. That's the first misconception. The second misconception, which I often talk about, is that when you're going abroad, you're going for a specialization, right? Actually, going abroad or any kind of global experience is supposed to broaden your horizons, right? It's supposed to make you more aware of your possibilities for your future. It's supposed to help you come out of your assumptions and your received wisdom and received knowledge and all the biases and prejudices you live with in your own society and all the assumptions you make. Experiences to help you do. It's supposed to be more unlearning than learning and specializing. And the third mistake, which a lot of people make, is that you can get global exposure just by going abroad, just by leaving your country. In the process, we haven't internationalized our curriculum. We haven't focused enough attention on bringing international students and scholars into our campuses, and we haven't focused on the vast majority of students who cannot afford to go abroad to give them that global exposure at home itself, right, in their institutions itself. So I think these are the three common misconceptions among Indians, which hamper a more forward-looking vision of what global exposure, globalization, and internationalization mean. Just to repeat them first: the excessive brand consciousness that we have, to this idea that when you're going to study abroad, you're going for specialization, and going abroad is the only way of getting a global exposure.
Ma'am, regarding our own universities that we have in our India, what do you think that these universities have to offer the students that they will not get at an international platform?
Uh, okay, so one of the things I've said in my book, I've definitely acknowledged the fact that I'm a product of the public education system in India, and I'm very indebted to that system. I think that fundamentally the concept of learning in India transcends classroom learning, right? There's a possibility of learning as much outside of the classroom in India as there is inside of the classroom, or maybe even more. So I think there's a very unique way in which you learn things in India. The other thing is that the motivation and the drive and the hunger we have for things in India as young people is something quite unparalleled in the rest of the world. And another in India, just navigating your way through Indian society, is a deep appreciation for diversity and an ability to struggle until you've achieved your goals, right? So I think these are some very unique characteristics that we have in India. Unfortunately, we often underrate them ourselves. These are, some of the qualities, some of the attributes that we can share with the rest of the world. And I really hope to, through the message of my book, to make that statement at as many different at as many different places and as many different fora as possible around the world.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your insights. And viewers, this was Madam Kalyani Unkule. She was discussing about her book, Internationalizing the Universities, and giving some useful the scholars, the students who are studying in India and want to pursue their careers abroad. The first takeout of the interview was that we should stop following the branding and we should stop underestimating our own education system and our own values. We have the India has the diversity, India has the potential to offer at an international level that we need to cherish. Thank you so much, ma'am.